Why is AGI so difficult to achieve? I want to talk about that today because it kind of bugs me that it's kind of thrown around like the biggest buzzword, the marketing word, the hype word of artificial intelligence right now. And it gives people a completely wrong impression of what is actually going on right now, especially with people promising, oh, just a couple of years down the line, we're going to have AGI. But before we get started with this incredibly interesting topic, I have the best images from our daily challenge that is happening on my Discord. So here is the first image from Freak Hitman for the topic, the Academy of Alchemy in the Mysterious Forest. Really cool image of a dragon in a library, a little bit of Harry Potter vibes here, lots of fantasy feels. Then we have from Enraged Antelope for the topic, a city inside a giant crystal. This really cool image of some gemstones lying on the ground with a New York looking city inside of that. Really impressive, looking very artful, very, very nice. Next we have, this is for Wednesday, from Ginging or Jinjin, Gamers Immersed in Alternative Realities was a topic for that day. And we have a really cool image that mixes a pixel art style with a more modern but also surrealist style, kind of a bubble that is expanding in front of what looks like a VR headset. Next we have from Paleopteryx for the topic, artists painting tableau variants. Pretty interesting image that kind of is also inspiring AI by the guy not actually using a brush but using kind of his emotions, projecting them onto the canvas and try to call forward an image on that canvas. Pretty cool. Next we have Chakulk with the topic, living buildings grown from seed. Pretty cool style. A little bit of a claymation style mixed with the photographic style. We have a little bit also of this depth of field with some blur in the background, and it reminds of the green beans that are growing into the sky. Next we have from Enraged Antelope for the topic, shadow theater with magical characters. This really cool image here reminds me of the shadow theaters you have in Asia, where they hold up these cut out forms against a canvas and it's lit from one side to create that shadow with very precise forms. So pretty cool. I can almost see how this is moving around. And then the last one for Sunday is from Infidelis. The topic is metamorphosis, people turning into animals, and here we have something that kind of reminds me of Diablo 3, Diablo 4, where we have this kind of humanoid character turning into, might that be an eagle? Something like that. Really cool. Okay, let's get started with the topic of today. Let's break this down into several perspectives of why there is such a big problem with achieving AGI. So the first thing for that is, what is actual information? And there's a big difference on how computers handle information and how we handle information in our brains. Because one of the big buzzwords also out there is the human level intelligence. And if you have AGI, if you have an AI that is able to adapt to problems, find solutions, learn in the process like we do, interact with the world and act in the world in an intelligent way, well, you have to be able to manipulate information, work with this information, and apply to real-world problems. But there's a certain very, very big problem with this, because the way that AI works right now, the way computers work right now, is that they basically have objective information, absolute information that they can then calculate with logic, with math. They find patterns, they have statistics, they have algorithms, they train models, and then they use this in a static, frozen way to spit out answers based on all this information. But the information is static and objective. So, of course, there is objective information in the world, like, for example, how fast an object is moving, how tall an object is, how much an object weighs, what the temperature is of that object. Yes, we can define that. This is objective information. There's not really discussion about how much an object weighs. Maybe there's a discussion how much it weighs on different planets, but let's say how fast it goes. Well, that's a fixed number. There's no discussion about that. But in human society, in human understanding, there is a lot of subjective information that is individual to us, and that includes very much our personal experience in the world, but also how we feel towards that information. Because for us humans, the meaning of information mostly is derived from how we feel towards that information, and that has a lot to do with our ability of problem solving in the world, because the world is constantly changing, it's constantly shifting, and there is not really any kind of absolute information out there between individuals in the world to say there's only one solution for this problem. We have to figure it out dynamically with each other through the conversation. And that is a very, very, very big difference, but it's also a fundamental element of why we are able to adapt to situations on the fly, but also the way in which we handle information and what information means to us. So there is a classic example here. We have a philosopher called Wittgenstein, and he tried to figure out a way to make human language logical, because he said one of the biggest problems with philosophy is that we don't really agree on what we are saying. So let's make language very systematic, very logical, so when we say a sentence, when we express something, everybody means exactly the same, and by that we can eliminate a lot of the problems, and we can talk in a very effective way about problems and understand exactly what the other person means. Well, of course, this doesn't work because our language doesn't work like that. It is not logical, it's not absolute, it is emotional, it's subjective, it constantly changes its meaning. I want to give you an example for that. Let's have the very simple sentence, John is running. Now, that is easy. You have a subject, John, and you have an activity, he's running. Okay, so everybody knows what that means. But running has a lot of different meanings. So John is running in the park. Okay, we know what that means. John is running out of money. Suddenly he isn't running anymore. He has financial problems. John is running the company. Well, again, he isn't running. He's doing something positive, effectively. He doesn't have a problem. He is doing his job, basically. John is running late. Again, he isn't running, but he's running out of time. So you can see running can mean a lot of things. So we have to figure out through the context what it means. And of course, also words change their context, their meaning over time, and have different meanings in different subcultures, in different parts of the world. For example, in different cultures, in different areas, we have different proverbs that are based on our history, on our experience, on the meaning, and of course, new proverbs, new ways to say things, new slang words come out every single day. Now, that is a huge problem if you have a system that is trained on static data that tries to analyze in an objective, measurable way these kind of patterns, then freeze that into a model and try to look for solutions inside that model to spit them out to you. If the situation is constantly changing, if the meaning is constantly changing, if you have adapted to the meaning all of the time, this model is basically useless in everyday use. And this is why most of the time, if we create something, if we create any kind of product or solution, we have a very specific solution for that. You have a video player, you have a music player, you have a software for your email, you have a software for painting. We don't do everything at the same time. We do it specialized. We don't do AGI software, basically. We don't do general software, we do specialized software. Now, There's another interesting element about that. You will listen, you will have this sensory input that another person is giving to you, telling you about what they want you to do. And then you listen to that and you try to figure out through your experience with that person, with that culture, with that process, what that person wants from you. And often there is conflict. You don't really know what they mean. So either you can resolve that conflict and kind of understand what you mean or they mean, or you go through the process and then check back. So they say, do this for me. So they say, make me a beautiful ad for my product. And you do a little bit of the work and say, is that what you think is beautiful? And they say, well, kind of, but a little bit different. So you adapt it again and then you ask again, is that closer to what you envision? And say, yeah, it's a little bit closer, but do it a little bit more like that. And over the process, you figure out together a solution, both of which is not exactly what either of you have imagined, but it's somewhere in the middle and it's going on the flow. And both of you learn in that process and both of you find new solutions in that process, through that process, by adapting to it, experiencing it, connecting to that process. None of that in any way can be done by AI at the moment because AI is basically only pattern analyzation combined with statistics, and then it spits out something that looks kind of like the pattern that you ask for. But that is kind of similar to how a parrot will repeat a word to you. What the parrot does is the parrot creates a sound that sounds similar to the word that you told the parrot over and over. But first of all, the parrot doesn't understand the meaning of the word. And second of all, to the parrot, it isn't a word, it's just a sound. Only to you, your brain combined with your ears recombines it into a word that you can understand. And when you can understand it, you can approve of that, you say to the parrot, you've done a good job, and you give it a little treat. But the parrot doesn't understand any of that. This is how AI works at the moment. Let's talk about another problem with AI and AGI. So far, we have talked about how our brain uses information compared to how a computer is using information, and you can see there is a really, really big difference. But let's talk about another difference that might not be as apparent, and that is actually our body. So you might think, what does the body have to do with learning things? Well, it has a lot to do with understanding information, a lot to do with experiencing information and the feedback loop between the existing world and the information and adapting to that information, which is, of course, what you need for problem solving. And this is why it's not just very important, it's a deeply rooted fundamental part of our human intelligence, is that we have that body that interacts with our brain. And actually, and this is the most important part about that, the only thing you ever will know about the world out there is the sensory input of your body. You don't actually have a real connection to the outer world. The only thing you have is the feeling from your skin, the smell, the stuff you see, the stuff you hear, the stuff you taste. This is sensory input giving to your brain, and then your brain works with that information. Now, all of that is incredibly important, and our ability to adapt to that in real time is even more important. So let's give you an example for that. Let's say you are touching a hot stove and you're burning your fingers. There's pain on your fingers. And you might think, okay, I've learned from that. Don't touch hot things. It makes awe on my fingers. It's not a good experience. Okay, so that's a one-time experience. You could say, well, you know, I can learn it from a book. Don't touch hot things. Okay, now I know that. That's easy to learn. But for the rest of your life, when and how do you actually know that you're touching something that is hot? Well, the only way you can do that is by having the sensory feedback from your body that you're touching something, and maybe that your body is getting damaged at that point and you have to find a solution to that. So you have to let go, and you maybe have to put some medication on your hands to heal your skin. So there is an always happening feedback loop, but an always also evolving loop between the outer world that is happening in front of you, that you have to adapt to in real time, and the information you have stored in your brain. And your brain is on the fly updating and adapting to that information, which again is a huge difference to what the AI models do that we have right now, because they are models. They are trained. You save them on your hard drive. They are frozen in that state. They don't adapt to anything. If the situation changes, it just says, I can't compute, and it either gives you a hallucination or it can't give you any output at all because it has never seen that kind of situation. So, of course, they try to update models and fine-tune the models on the fly, but basically the only thing that is doing right now is to add more frozen information to that, and then you can get a new formula that can spit out a result. But again, this result is not actual intelligence. It's not understanding anything. It's just repeating stuff like a parrot back to you on the information you have trained, but without any interpretation. Now, of course, with our body, we have a lot of interpretation, because not just our brain is interpreting things, also our body is interpreting things in the way we react to that. Everybody's a little bit different in how they feel about things, how they experience things. So for you, a sound might sound a lot louder than to another person. Something might smell a lot more salty than to another person, might be a lot more stinky than to another person, might feel a lot rougher or softer than to another person. We are all built different in a certain way. This is why we have people who are very good at the Olympic sports, why other people are not. It's not just training. We are not universally built for everything out there. Every one of us is a little bit different. And by the way, this is also why we have society, because we are not able to do everything at the same time, learn everything, and be good at everything. We complete each other. We need people who are good at baking and people who are good at driving or flying or photographing or all these kind of things, filmmaking. And even us, with our human level intelligence, are specialized in certain tasks. This alone should tell you a lot about the absurdity, actually, of general intelligence. Is actually my next talking point. We can actually switch to that right now. And that is the question, why? Why would anybody try to achieve AGI? Is there any purpose for that? Is there any company interested in that? And you would think, hey, it sounds really cool. Yeah, you know what also sounds really cool? Living forever, having all the money in the world, being the most attractive person on the planet. Is that something real to you that can ever achieve? Not so much, not really. It's a nice fantasy. It doesn't really have a place in the real world. We can't all be incredibly rich. Some people can be rich because a lot of other people are poor. And the same thing is basically true for the things we build. There is not any product out there that is general in purpose, that can do everything in the same way, in the same quality. And yes, I know you might say, wait a second, I have a computer. My computer can do everything. It's really good at movies and games and music and all kinds of other stuff. Yes, but it's not the computer that's doing that stuff. It's the software that's doing the stuff. The computer is just your machine, and yes, it is a general purpose machine that can do a lot of things. Just like your speaker can play any sound, doesn't mean that your speaker is actually creating that sound or your computer is actually doing the stuff. The software is doing the stuff. And the AGI is the software. So answer me this. Why would any company out there invest all of their money into an AI that is at the same time good at driving a car, making a movie, composing some music, and, I don't know, cooking a meal for you as a robot? It makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. It makes a lot more sense to have specialized AIs where a company will invest all their money into figuring out how to have an AI do that one task as good as possible with all their knowledge, with all their human experience, with all their human testing, so that the AI actually creates a result that to you as a customer feels good, has high quality, and actually they can guarantee that it works. Because it would be absolute rubbish when you have an AI that can kind of drive a car and kind of make a movie, but you kind of die when the movie making car is crashing into a wall because it also learned how to make coffee. That makes absolutely no sense. I want an AI that is good at driving a car and only good at driving a car. And then I want a second AI that is good at making a movie and show me that movie while the other AI is driving the car. Not a general intelligence that can't be tested on all the kind of situations out there, especially because the world is changing every day. We are confronted by millions of different situations, and even us as humans have an extremely hard time to navigate through that world and figuring out what is going on. This is why we have all these systems in place that help us and guide us. We have degrees, we have schools, we have working places, we have the police, we have a legal system, all these kind of things that help us to figure out how to get from A to B, how to live our life from the birth to the death, because all of that is incredibly difficult and incredibly variable, and it changes so much that from the time you're born to the time that you die, the world changes in such a huge degree that probably at the time you die, there's a lot of things you don't even understand anymore about the world. This is basically why we have generation conflicts, because every generation thinks their time was the golden age. It was really cool. After that came the new generation that is rude and it does things that don't work and it's destroying the world and the economy and taking away the culture. The reason is not because this is actually happening. The reason is because we fail to adapt to that. We don't learn enough about the new things that are happening, and we simply don't understand them. And this is why they look bad to us and why we fear them, because even us with our human intelligence are not able to adapt to the world, let alone a machine, and let alone the incredible complexity to build a machine that can do everything with human level. I'm happy if there is one thing with AI that actually works in a nice way, and have a specialized AI for all the different things, and then maybe have these AIs even work together. But AGI, why? I don't see a reason for that. Thanks for watching. I hope this video was interesting to you. Leave a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of that. And see you soon. Bye.